Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new year. If you didn't know already, 2024, often get that date confused, as I think we all do. What year is it? Now, when you remember 2000, you know you're in trouble. When you're an adult in 2000, it was like, how could that possibly happen? It's sort of 24, 25 years almost later. We're still here, still here, and hopefully doing well. So I hope you're well today. I hope I find you well. And if you're not, hang in there, and better times will always come again. That's the nature of life, supported by the Gooners, that their life is always changing, and, bad times roll with good, and then good times tends to go south, and, it's a merry-go-round until it's not. Enjoy it. And then, as they say in the Bhagavad Gita, for the harder times, sometimes we just have to bear them, and then sometimes we can change our attitude towards them. So I suppose on that note, we're looking at the podcast today as a take on attitudes to practice again. So how can we stay motivated, enthused, inspired by a practice that is, well, repetitive, and just goes on every day? It's like, you've just finished one and you think, well, that's a good job done, pleased with that. Pleased I motivated myself and did it, And then it's like the next day, the same again already. And I think, no one feels that they, kind of super enthused to get on the mat every day. And I think if people claim they do, I don't quite believe them, I think, the whole point of the practice is to try and stabilize ourselves, or, something along those lines, to a world that's always changing. And we're always inspired, basically human beings with our senses pointed outwards. We're always inspired to go into the world and engage with it, go into the world and consistently seek stimulation and excitement and novelty, and change. Like, our senses are structured on change. They need, to feel, to know ourselves. We need change. We, if any pleasure goes on for too long, for example, it becomes completely unfelt, or it turns to pain. So the senses themselves encourage us to act in a certain way. It's not exactly our fault. None of this is our fault, in fact. We're born into this mechanism, the body, the mind, and the world outside. And, if we don't do anything about it, we're just going to be taken on this, to use a word I just use, merry-go-round, carousel, continuously by the senses seeking new stimulus, because that's what the senses do. So the whole idea of yoga is obviously to control the senses. And you start with the easiest thing, which is to control the senses, because it's a lot easier to do that than to control the mind. And then you work inwards from there. So it's like, well, you look at the problem. Okay, the world is continuously changing. We are, according to yoga anyway, not Buddhism, but according to yoga, we're essential. We have an essential nature, which is unchanging, which is not temporary, which is, eternal, according to yoga. And, even on a superficial level, if we are a consistent thing inside, right? You know yourself and you feel the same way as you did when you were, like, we were talking about the year 2000. You feel the same way as you did in 2000. You feel that same sense of self. There's a consistent, stable, continuous entity there that wants to know itself in that manner. But we constantly look outside and evolve ourselves with outside stimulus, which is always changing. So therein lies the kind of painful bit, is that we're something which is the same, and yet we look to constantly changing world to find ourselves there, and it's constantly changing, and we try and continuously hold on to the world and make it the same, to reflect ourselves in the way that we want to know ourselves, which is sameness. But it doesn't do that. It moves around and it doesn't do what we want, and therefore lies that there's this struggle, this pain, this suffering. In the end, I mean, you call it pain, but sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's just a bit discontent or a bit bored. But at the end of the day, it's is this change is the problem. The changing world, and the fact that we aren't, inside, our consciousness is not changing. It's, that when we have that sense of peace, right, there's that sense of peace that comes from having a situation that is just stable, nothing at all. We're not feeling anything, we're not being stimulated at all. But I suppose that's a bit of a diversion, really. So we have this situation with the senses anyway, which distracts us from practice. Obviously, one day we want to do this, we want to practice. I mean, I remember when you went to the practice first time, you just like walked out, God, my God, how did I never do this? And then it's like, fourth day, fifth day, it's already feeling like, okay, that was good, still good. A few months later, it's like, well, now I've got a little bit of tweaks and a little bit of aches and pains, and should I continue this? And 5 years down the line, or when did I start? 1990. late 1990s, so, I mean, a bloody long time, to be honest, right? And, how do you continue getting up and doing something like that when you'd rather just go and make a coffee and have a cappuccino and have a croissant, I mean, honestly, but you feel better for it. So I suppose that's the first thing, is how you continue. Well, you've got all this weight of built up experience that it's good for you, right? So you just use that. And I'm using the things that you are, really, honestly. I maybe just have done it for a longer time, and I happen to have the skill of articulating it sometimes. So first of all, I use that. I sit on the sofa and I think, like, if you don't do that, how will you feel? You do something. And then secondly, the obvious thing I've said a million times, do something, do something, and don't think you have to do everything. Just think, I'm going to get on the mat and do something. I think that's David Swenson's idea in the first place, right? Just get on the mat, roll it out, stand on it, and that's a practice, right? And then, to be honest, nothing ever just goes, you don't just ever get on the mat and then roll it back out again, roll it and put it back in the cupboard, right? You're going to do something more at that point, right? So therein lies, the second thing is just like, let yourself off the hook, as we say. Don't feel you have to do everything. Doing something is more than enough. Yeah. And sometimes you're tired, right? And sometimes you should respect your body. How do you know? Well, it's difficult, but you get on the mat and you start and you see how you feel, And I think if one's honest and one doesn't have a sense of mental ambition, well, I ought to do this, I ought to do that, you kind of know how you feel, push yourself, because often it's more effective going with your body than just trying to do the same thing every day, in terms of progress, and certainly in terms of your mental and emotional evolution. God knows about the spiritual. Anyway, I'll leave that to you. But we're more pragmatic today. I can talk about that, but we're talking about how to continuously maintain a focus for practice, maintain motivation, and goals, realistic goals as well, because they make a big difference to focus and motivation, right? If you've got a goal, as I said, if you've got a goal of having to do the same thing every day, like you did in Mysore, or like your Mysore teacher tells you to, this ought to be a 6 days a week practice. You need to practice it every day. Why? Simply, why? Only yoga, after all, it's meant to make you feel better. It's meant to support your life. You're not meant to structure your whole life around yoga, although it's an easy trap to fall into. I did this for many years, but then I was a careerist yogi, as it were, careerist yogi, no, not at all, but a careerist yoga teacher, yes. And in terms of wanting to progress through the series, in terms of myself as a teacher and my reputation as a teacher, let's say, and all this stuff is, it creeps in there, and it's going to creep into the practice because we're all human, At the end of the day, like, it's just because we're doing yoga. It's not a magic force field around you. They say, as soon as you're doing yoga, you no longer have ambition. You no longer have personal motivations. You no longer have vanity or pride towards it. Of course you do. Of course you do. The yoga's there to give you that same experience of, of sameness every day. And in the end, it kind of chips away at this trying to make yourself something in the world. So you're trying to, because this is all what the senses are doing. They're looking out in the world to define us. We feel this inherent sense of lack. I mean, assuming this inherent sense of lack is where you get the Christian idea of original sin. You feel this inherent sense of lack. Looking out in the world is the most immediate thing to do. When a baby's crying, it's looking out for something, And then and then continuously being told to, and naturally doing so, looking outside to embellish, to develop, to make ourselves something more. The sense of lack or not enough is just so deeply embedded. So we keep doing that, and we're going to do that in yoga as well, trying to keep adding on experiences, kind of adding on postures, adding on accomplishment. The sense of making ourselves enough through accomplishment is what yoga is trying to chip away at. You do something long enough, and you start to even, you get to my age, 45 almost, you start to backslide, what is it all about now, And that's where it really gets interesting, right? When you get injuries, in a way, not to be too Pollyanna about it, but when you get setbacks, when you get injuries, when you don't feel like it, that's when it really gets interesting. I mean, anyone could be accomplished at something and feel good about something. And you probably got into yoga because you were reasonably okay at it, So, and then we just do the same thing as we did anywhere else, generally, try and be better at it, And usually, unfortunately, better has to be in comparison to, we don't set those challenges completely to do with ourselves alone. Better is comparison to someone else, to other people. How am I in this whole room of practitioners? How do I stand, blah 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 in this in this community, and my level, is my level good enough? Well, if you've never seen anyone practicing Ashtanga, right, and when you got into it first of all and you walked into the room, it was just a joke, seeing Jalanshashasana C, Marichyasana D, is this for real? And just thinking, it was so out of the ballpark, you didn't even think of comparing yourself. You just had to go and enjoyed it. And then soon enough, you start getting it. I'm talking about my own journey. It may not be yours. You start getting a bit good at it, and then you start comparing. The whole thing starts again, But when you've got, I suppose when you walk into the room, immediately you've got this kind of beginner's mind that you're just enjoying it, enjoying the experience of being embodied, enjoying the personal challenge. And I just remember kind of laughing at what I couldn't do, which latterly, like in Mysore, certainly wasn't the case. I wasn't laughing compared to people that could do things that I couldn't do at all, It's very sad, But nevertheless, it's part of the process of looking outside until we realize there's nothing outside that will add a one iota, one thing extra to the experience of what we are already, right? And it will only make us sadder because we're trying to keep those experiences the same in order to experience ourselves as we are, because because those things need to be pinned around us to give us a sense of self. But of course they slip and slide and move, and then the sense of self is problematized. If your role slightly shifts, or you don't have this or that, or you don't have the car with the yoga postures, or the sound like a film star, the car, the ladies, the yoga postures anymore, then what are you now? If your density is pinned on the outside. But all this stuff is very obvious, isn't it? Nevertheless, we probably don't think about it all the time because, again, not our fault. And what the beauty of yoga is that it doesn't point the finger and say, well, this is your fault, like, Christianity, that what I grew up with, or Catholicism, or whatever, you're to blame for this. Yoga just says, well, this is the mechanism, this is the world you're born into, and this is the body you're born into, and it has these things pertaining to it. And hey, wait a minute, it has this whole bag that you've been given on birth called karma. You've inherited it through parents, or if you believe in reincarnation, you've inherited it through the kind of conglomerate of all the energy that's come through, which just seems like in the first place, a more reasonable idea than just thinking you just popped up out of nothing and came to nothing. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what then? Did the world get created on lust? Because otherwise, if you don't accept any idea that, there's something that continues and, which is basic physics, isn't it? No energy just comes and goes. Nevertheless, we kind of think that, it's a sperm and an egg created us. Well, yes, maybe that's what happens when you look at the bits. But, were we just created by lust of our parents? Is that the significance of a human life? I would suggest that there's a long train of events. Yeah. But, of course we don't know, and that's a bit of a diversion. And we're coming back to realistic expectations. For some reason, we got very waylaid there. Realistic expectations on practice is essential. So if you start comparing yourself to other people, as I did for years, I need to do leg behind head. I need to do a better jump back or lift up, or, something I was obsessed with, lifting up to the handstands and stuff from Navasana or from seated positions, and, you want to do that, and you think when you get that, they'll be happy. But of course, let me tell you, for nothing, it's not. It doesn't make it. No, I managed to do most of the things I wanted to do. Wasn't any happier at all. In fact, in lots of ways, unhappier, because then you feel like, well, there's something you have to hold on to. But on the other hand, you have to go through it to realize, just like a rich person can tell you, money doesn't matter. But when you're here, I'm not super poor, but when you're here without much cash, struggling and still feeling like you need to make $1, you think, well, money is a bit of an answer, money, but then you realize, and you get there, don't feel any happier. Same with yoga. Some ways you have to go through it in order to know that it doesn't make any difference to postures. But that's, again, an aside. Realistic expectations, the obvious, as I said in a post recently, pick ones that aren't too high. Don't compare yourself with another. I've been teaching for so many years now, and I've looked around every workshop I've done at all these different bodies and just thought, how can we even compare these bodies to one another? They're so different. Of course you have certain body types, but they're so different. It's not even comparable. It's like going, well, what's a better fruit? Is it an apple or a peach? It's like, well, how can you compare the two fruits? You just be the best peach you can be. That's a bit sappy, isn't it? But, that's the point. You cannot compare yourself to what another person's doing. It just doesn't make sense. You get up one time after Maestro and look around at all the different bodies and the way they're moved, and you'll realize, looking from because you don't usually do that if you're just a student, to look at everyone. But when you do, you realize, God, how could I possibly compare my body to someone else's? Anyway, what point is there anyway? So realistic expectations, pick your own, and don't pick things too high, because you'll just be disappointed and then you'll feel like quitting. Yeah. And the last thing, basically, you need to continue this asana stuff until it kind of shows you enough that, well, maybe you don't need to use it so how would I put this? So effortfully, you don't have to spend so much time and effort on it. Once you've got the point, I think that then you can, use asana, keep the body conditioned, but also shift to, other things, reading, reflective books, scriptures, whatever is your thing, pranayamas, meditations, it spreads outwards. I think it ought to spread outwards, right? It's after all Ashtanga yoga, apparently. So, but until then, concentrate on the asana, and you need it till you don't need it. And I absolutely needed it for so many years just to stay on program, I said this before, I think, but coming from a background of, just basic addictions, really, like anything I did, I'd get addicted to. I still have that propensity, whether it's alcohol. When I went to university, I was drinking all the time, and I was in a bad place, smoking 30 cigarettes a day, and then I do something else and I become, it's just that, certain people like myself, they just have this a burning feeling inside, just really need something to, it's just like almost like I felt like just to purify my insides, so much discordant energy, crazy energy circulating, and I needed it. And I don't feel that anymore. Maybe it's just age, maybe it's the practice. I'm never going to make any claims about anything because I haven't got a control. I haven't got a me that didn't do it. But all I can say is what seems to maybe be the case with me. Anyways, pick those expectations and don't set yourself ones that are too high, because you need to do this continuously and regularly until you don't need it anymore. Coming back to motivation, right? I know we've taken a lot of tangential leaps in this podcast. Motivation, it comes and goes. Don't expect to be motivated the same way you're in summer as winter, for example, right? Your body's going to be stiffer in the cold. It's going to be dark. It's just that time is just it's just like keeping the spark alive. And then you got spring, you got summer. It's like, much more yang, kind of like developing, evolving, maybe making a little progress. And then winter, just nurturing, keeping things going, keeping it ticking over. And this is the same with phases of one's life, obviously parenthood being the obvious one. I've not had kids, but I can only imagine what happens when you try and continue a practice and have children. It's like everything probably goes south pretty fast, I'm sure. I know from the experience of my friends and students. So, that's the time. Just doing a little bit is amazing, but don't let the spark go out altogether, because it's really hard, as to start a fire from scratch. If you ever had a fire in your house, what I did when I was growing up, it's hard to start it, but when it gets going, just keeping it going, and a smouldering those embers, and then you put something on it and it quickly catches fire again. Same with practice. Do a little bit every day. Could just be getting out on the mat, doing something again. But don't let it go out altogether. And don't let yourself be unmotivated, right? That's not quite the right turn of phrase. Don't let yourself be dejected or despondent by setting your goals too high, biting off more you can chew, or getting stuck on a posture. How many people have I known that have gotten stuck on Kapotasana or something like, it's particularly Capo, isn't it? Or maybe leg behind head, or, there's a couple of points where it's almost stopped them practicing altogether. Because of this dread or frustration or disappointment around those postures. Well, come on, just take it out for a while. You've got to stay motivated, and whatever it takes to keep motivated with this practice, do it. If it involves less jump backs, do that. If it involves more jump backs, do that. If it involves taking out a posture for a while, adding something in, just something different that gives you a little bit, a couple of handstands here or there that gives you a bit of motivation, or whatever is your thing, taking it slower, taking it faster, putting music on. I mean, I remember practicing, many years ago, I did a teacher training with John Scott, his first one ever. Right? John Scott's, he's a Kiwi teacher, but he was in London for many years. And I remember being surprised. After going through teaching us in the morning, he would do his own practice. And sometimes I would do practice with him there, just me and him. Amazing experience. But he would put music on, quite often put music on, and we would do that with music. And that's, one of our, leading old generation Mysore teachers, right? So, you don't have to be so rigid and formulaic about it. And, what's traditional in the first place, there's nothing worse, than feeling despondent and wanting to quit. Whatever it takes to continue a practice, do that rather than quitting. And then other things, it's careful use of social media, right? If you're using too much social media, that can kind of put you off, right? Because it's like, it's a bit sickening for one. Seeing me too much, and secondly, you're seeing all these people that can do all this stuff, and they may be young, because usually young people can do stuff, and it's just like, oh God, and then you get on the mat yourself, that's pretty disinspiring, if that's a word. So skillful use of that, maybe less generally for most of us. Or sometimes, when I started practicing in the early days, we didn't have social media, so I would just use YouTube, and I would look at things that motivated me, like Sharat talking in Mysore. This is when Patabi Joyce was still alive, or Patabi Joyce talking, or or Sharat practicing, or just something for a couple of minutes that would get me in the mood. Coffee, I still use it. It does help. Too much coffee obviously doesn't help, and it's certainly not ideal. Let's say. I know they always said in Mysore, more coffee, more prana, or whatever it is, or no coffee, no prana. But in the first place, they're using coffee cut with chicory, which not only balances the acidic levels of coffee, but it's less strong. It's a lot less strong. Okay, we can move on from the sugar quantity in there. But nevertheless, I believe on good information that Sharat doesn't even drink coffee anymore. So it's something I'd like to quit, but, it can help. Other motivating factors, well, over the long term, set long goals. Don't set short goals. Don't judge one practice as, look, one practice over a year of practices means very little. Just sometimes you just got to do it, not think about it. And, I've often moved through a practice and thought, well, that was bad at the start, bad at the middle, and bad at the end. I'm just pleased to have done it. And I can't think of anything good about that experience, and that happens, but reflectively when you look back, some of those practices were quite meaningful for you, and certainly meaningful because you kept on, and it gave you a more confidence that you can keep on even when you don't want to keep on, even when the mind tells you, the senses tell you no. This is the whole point, taking back our autonomy from the natural world and our bodies, which don't want to give it to us, which want to lead us by the nose through life and basically allow us to go into our most appetitive, most animal instincts possible, and we're taking back our responsibility and deciding for ourselves what we want to do. So some of those practices are really confirm back to yourself, okay, I do have the strength to resist. I do have the strength to make my own decisions up, even though my body tells me no. And, sometimes it's hard because sometimes you should listen to the body, and sometimes you have to override, what you feel like, in the most obvious sense. So that call can only be made by yourself. I think with Ashtanga practitioners, generally there's a level of discipline there already that, probably we should be taking it easy on ourselves rather than overriding those kind of feelings in the body, as I'm speaking to a certain audience, I think. So, yeah, I mean, long-term goals, not short-term goals. One practice does not matter. A rubbish practice does not matter. And a good practice doesn't matter. You're seeing yourself over a long period, and keeping up the practice is the point. Because in the end, because David Swenson said, you're looking for a sign, you're getting better. You're looking for a sign, you're getting better. And in the end, you find a sign. Oh, yes, actually, over, when you get to my age, starting to get a bit worse or a lot worse. But so it's keeping it up, and it doesn't mean you don't enjoy it as much. You enjoy it more. You enjoy it more, honestly. Doing less and feeling more and having something, and the gestures become more meaningful the more you've done them. It's like you're building up layers of meaning in the body, in what you're doing. It becomes so poignant, to use a word that maybe if you're not an English speaker, maybe you don't know, so significant, so that each gesture can become imbued, full of meaning, and that's what you should feel, not every time. Sometimes it's just like, well, I don't feel it, I'm not feeling it, and I'm just going to do it anyway. And you do have to sometimes just make your mind like a robot. But other times you have to listen. And I can't be there to tell you when you should or shouldn't practice. That's a tricky one. But I think if it goes on for a period of time where you just don't feel like it, then, you need to look at the diet. You need to look at your general lifestyle. You need to get some checkups, just to feel like, okay, is there something wrong here? Is it practice that's not suiting me? Is it the way I'm practicing not suiting me? Because Ashtanga can be practiced by anyone, but, certainly, not anyone. If you want to just crash through a primary and a second series every day or practice for hours or push yourself, that can't be done by anyone. It certainly can't be done by an older person, so sometimes it's not Ashtanga. As people say, oh, I don't think Ashtanga's right for me. It's like, well, it's like saying I don't think yoga's right for me. It's just yoga, Ashtanga. It's just like, if you like to flow, if you like to connect postures, if you like a focus on the breath, then, Ashtanga's great, and it can be, and the doing itself, the literal application can look like anything, you can do Ashtanga in the yin style, very, very slow and a few postures, same Ashtanga method, or you can do Ashtanga in the traditional style with the count as it normally is, So yeah, it's not the fault of Ashtanga, which is just essentially yoga in the end. But if something goes on too long, and you're not feeling inspired, look at it and change something. You've got to change something. Maybe it's an injury. Maybe it's something you need to look at. Maybe you need to seek a second opinion or a third opinion on what you're doing, or just on your health generally. Often it's it can be around diets. If you've adopted a vegetarian or a vegan diet for many years, and maybe that's not working for you anymore, you need to look at that again, as ethically sound as that is. That can be the case and I think increasingly people are feeling that. You need to just introduce some sense of protein, or now and again, maybe just eggs. Right. Finally, I think with the practice, the last thing I wanted to say is that keeping a consistent time and place makes it so much easier, and having a few things around that kind of remind you of it, like having something in front of you. It doesn't have to be a picture of Patabi Joyce or Sharat, something meaningful, whatever that is for you. Just as a focal point, being in the same space. You know how hard it is to practice when you're not in the same space, right? When you're moving around, and how hard it is to get started, so that really helps, having a consistent kind of rhythm of lifestyle. And I think yoga works best if it's structured around a kind of rhythm of lifestyle, because if you're here, there, and everywhere, and then you're trying to practice and your life is too chaotic, then that, I think, needs to be looked at first, and, alongside the structuring of the asana, Otherwise, you're doing this semi-stimulating practice, and then the life is also stimulating, and you end up more stimulated. And I've talked about that before, I think, and I shan't talk about it too much today, that, practice can easily overstimulate you, where it's meant to be stabilizing, and basically making your consciousness clearer, clearer of emotional biases and prejudices and various desires that keep on confusing us and distracting us from the essential question, which is, and the essential question since we've been born is, what is it that's going on here, basically, and in our postmodern worlds, we just don't want to answer, we even forget to ask that anymore. It's like, well, who cares? Or, I don't know. Or, but that's the question, I think, ultimately behind all our desires and all our likes and our dislikes and everything we're doing, it still comes down to that same question as it ever did. So yeah, find a place which stabilizes you, and then that place isn't kind of when you get in there to that place to do your practice in the morning, you can remember yesterday's practice and the day before, and you think, well, I really don't like it, today. I don't want to do it. I don't feel well. I always used to feel like I didn't feel well before doing it. Every time almost. I don't feel well, and maybe I shouldn't do it today. But you remember yesterday, and you think, well, I had the confidence and the perseverance and the strength to continue yesterday, and it worked out. It worked out for me. And then the next day you get there and you have that bit stronger because of the same association with the space, with your mat, with the icon. You can travel with this icon, whatever it is to put in front of your mat. That helps as well, right? If you have to travel, these days we're all moving around so much, right? So that thing happens as well, because you're building up self-confidence, and that's the last thing I suppose I wanted to say is I think, for me, a great deal of it was just building that self-trust, that self-confidence, that if you put your money somewhere, that's where your mouth is, because that's the right way to say it. You what you say you do. Yeah. And for a long time, I struggled with discipline. Let's say, as everyone does in a teenager and early 20s, and living this bad lifestyle, as I told you, I was, doing all bad things, and not too bad, but like not living a disciplined lifestyle anyway. And I didn't have any confidence anymore. Like I couldn't be bothered. If schoolwork and essay and university work, and I didn't have any trust that I would follow through anymore. Yeah, if I did something, I would carry it through, and that's a big deal. So I think ultimately what yoga gave me back is that sense that I'm going to do something and I can stick to it. I can have the confidence to do something that's hard. Yeah, because life is all hard, and if you don't pick your own difficult challenges, they'll just be given to you. It'll just be generally hard, so you have to pick your own difficult ones. Yeah. And you have the confidence to stick to them. Yeah. But also you have to know why you're doing it. Yeah? Because if you don't have, if you're just doing it because you feel you ought to, or just doing it for the sake of cosmetics, for a body, or, it's never enough. You have to pick the most meaningful thing, approach as you can, and keep making that more meaningful, right? Because we're looking for meaning, and we're always going through it now, because you don't get up every morning early morning in the dark and practice just for the sake of a good body. I can tell you, in the end, that wears thin. Do you know what I mean? Like, or for the sake of putting a leg behind the head, or for the sake of any series or whatever, or belonging to the Ashtanga community. You have to find that meaning in yourself to continue. So that's the constant thing in the end, you could say listening to the whole thing is kind of, as we say in English, money for old rope, because in the end it's a search for meaning, because it's the meaning behind it and the understanding of even if you don't, the continuous mining or continuous search for building up that meaning that goes hand in hand with the doing. Yeah, and the doing reflects some meaning, and then you've got that lucidity in the mind to keep up practice through the meaning you're engendered, and it's kind of like a positive spiral. And then we can go into negative spirals, so easily in life. If you don't have a positive spiral, you end up usually being in a negative spiral, right? Nothing, has a meaning into it, so you don't take care in the life, so that reflects back to you a lack of meaning, and you go in this negative tangent, or you don't trust yourself, so you don't follow through, so therefore you don't trust yourself, therefore you don't follow through, right? Same old, so you're breaking that spiral with yoga. Yeah. And it reasserts to you every day when you've done it, yes, I'm going to choose that light path. I'm going to choose the path of uprightness and being and doing the best thing I can for myself and for everyone else around me and for the world, rather than just resorting to the darkness inside us, which is always there for all of us as well, and just choosing the bad path. I think in sometimes, although it's a little bit heaven hell, isn't it? It is as simple as that polarity. When you can make better choices, and when you're going with that darker element inside you to make the worst choices or worse choices. Yeah. So in the end, just keeping on searching for that meaning, trying to make better choices, but not blaming yourself either when you don't fulfill those choices. Just get on the mat and have another go the next day. Yeah. There's no praise or blame. It's all coming together in the end for all of us, and we'll all get there in the end. No. Kind of certain of that. Anyway, I'm wishing you the best, most successful, most meaningful new year that you can have. And if it doesn't turn out that way, that's fine too, because it's all heading in the right direction for us all. Anyway, for me, only today at Keelan Yoga, have a great start to the new year. And if I don't see you online at the Mysore class, perhaps, I run the Mysore every day online, remember? Come and join it anytime. Just pop in one time. That's fine. Maybe I'll see you in a workshop this year. I've got loads of workshops in Europe and some elsewhere in Goa at Purple Valley and Thailand coming up and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, lots of places to see me and meet me in person if you fancy it, or just pop in online one day and say hello. Anyway, for me, from Australia today, from a rainy Melbourne, it's signing off. And goodbye. Have a great day.